Welcome to the Champs App podcast, where we help players and parents demystify the world of minor hockey development and recruiting for both girls and boys. We have an amazing episode for you today. If you are a goaltender or the parent of a goaltender, you will really enjoy my conversation with the University of Minnesota Duluth Associate Head Coach, Laura Bellamy. We talk about how she became a great goalie growing up in Minnesota and then stopping pucks at Harvard. Then we go deep on the University of Minnesota Duluth hockey program. And of course, we discuss the art and science of goaltending and her perspective on how to deal with the current recruiting environment. I really hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Before we start the podcast, I wanted to let you know about the app in Champs App. Champs App lets you create a free, beautiful online hockey resume to share with coaches, teams, and players. Your profile includes all the information coaches want to know to help decide if you are a player they want to keep on their recruiting radar. What makes Champs App unique is that you can then connect directly with college, prep, or team coaches, and they can then follow your updates. So when you add a new highlight video or a game to your schedule, they will automatically get notified of these changes to your profile. It's a really easy way to keep all your connections up to date. Just go to www.champs.app and click the sign up button to start your profile. And check out the links in the show notes to see a list of some of the college coaches already using Champs App that you can connect with. Stay tuned after the episode for more details on how easy it is to create your Champs App hockey resume. I'd like to welcome to the podcast Laura Bellamy, who is the Associate Head Coach with the Minnesota Duluth Bulldogs women's ice hockey program. Laura is actually originally from Duluth, Minnesota. However, she was lured to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and was a standout goalie for 4 years at Harvard University, where she won 60 games and was a captain in her senior year. After graduation, she immediately began her coaching career at Harvard, where she was an assistant coach for 2 years. She then returned home to Minnesota as an assistant coach at UMD, where she has been for the last 6 years. Recently, Laura was selected the 2022 recipient of the Women's Ice Hockey Assistant Coach Award by the American Hockey Coaches Association. Welcome to the podcast, Laura.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Quite the goalie resume you have. Why don't we start off like we do all our guests and tell us a little bit about your hockey history, how you started playing hockey, and why you became a goalie.
Yeah, good questions. Fortunate to grow up here in Duluth, big hockey town. I come from a hockey family, and by that I mean both my parents played. My mom played growing up. My dad played growing up. My brother played as well, and when he started playing, I don't think it was long that he was a player. He started playing goalie pretty quickly. He's 3 years older than I am, so I distinctly remember the first time he kind of went through his first set of pads, and he was ready to get another set of goalie pads. I wanted that old pair, so kind of from then on, I got in the pads, and yeah, we were both goalies, and I played all the way.
How old were you at this point when you put on the pads for the first time?
What's that?
How old were you at that point when you put on the pads for the first time?
Yeah, I was probably about 7. So I had played hockey a little bit. I was fortunate. One of my first coaches ever was Jamie Stauber. His brother is Rob Stauber, who is obviously a famous goalie. And so yeah, he was my coach. And, I skated out for a couple of years, and then he thought it might be a good idea to move me back. And like I said, my brother was moving out of his first set of pads. So I strapped him on, and ever since I don't play goalie anymore, but I played for quite a while, and then it led me to a college career too. So just fortunate.
Let's get into some really specific questions here about what made you such a really good goalie. So I'm going to start with the most basic question: is how good a skater were you at the time you actually became a goalie?
Okay. I was a good skater, and that's kind of where Jamie and Rob come in. Rob's advice to Jamie was, we were like mite level. We were all skating out. You kind of rotated who played goalie. And I think if we played goalie, you didn't even necessarily put the equipment on. You just kind of stood in the net. And that was Rob's advice to Jamie was find your best skater and have them be the goalie once it got to squirts or whatever the level was. And so there was already kind of that conversation that he thought I should be the goalie based on that. And then, like I said, my brother played. So it did have to do with skating ability. I still feel like I'm a pretty good skater. Not the greatest. Our kids certainly skate better than I do, but it definitely led to being comfortable in the net on my edges and all that sort of stuff.
Okay. And then related to that, so you said, your brother grew out of his pads and you wanted to put them on. What was it specifically about being a goalie that like you had so much passion for? Was it you just wanted to be like your brother? Was it because you like just getting pucks, shot at you, by other kids and you stopping it? Like what is it that really got into your brain saying like,
I love doing this.
Yeah, it was definitely my brother's, like his influence, him being a goalie. That's what I had around the house. So I always followed him around, whether it was, baseball, then it was hockey season. I'm following him around. So it was that he did it. On it, I'll be completely honest. I think early on, going to the store and getting to look at all the goalie stuff was an experience, and it was so fun. And like I said, I ended up wearing his old pads for quite a while, but that part of it definitely drew me in as a kid. I don't know that I loved it at first, but when I think back, probably at a pretty young age, probably by the time I was 10, I loved it. That's where I wanted to be, was in the net, and then stuck with for a long time.
Gotcha. What's interesting about your story is that you just had an older sibling playing, usually who actually played goalie. Usually it's the, the older brother just needs somebody to actually play goalie, and they just put you in net because they want you to, they need somebody to help stop the puck.
Exactly. That's the funny thing about it. Like, I didn't have the sibling who could shoot on me. I mean, we were both goalies, so it was just, in the neighborhood game of street hockey, you had two goalies, like one on each end. But it definitely was more the neighbors shooting on me than my own brother.
Okay, last really youth question, like specific to becoming a goalie, is how did your parents feel about you becoming a goalie? Obviously, they were already comfortable with your brother. Did they have any like gender concern issues about like the girl playing goalie, or they just treat you the same and
Wow.
they were encouraging you from day one?
Yeah, I think there really wasn't much of that. Like I said, my mom played growing up, which was pretty uncommon, I think, for, in her era. I think her team had kids on it from ages, 8 to 18 just to make a team, which was, obviously a wide age range, but that was what they did to make it work. And so it's probably pretty uncommon for her to play, but my parents always, my mom skated, they never viewed it that way. My uncle was the manager of the sporting goods store, so that definitely helped us from an equipment standpoint, but it was like, throw the pads on. I played on a boys team at the time, and I was just treated like everyone else.
Got it. Okay, great. Now, let me ask you a Minnesota hockey related question. So, as you may or may not know, we had Winnie Brown on the podcast a few episodes ago, and we were actually in Minnesota a few weeks ago for an event, and I was just blown away at just how good all these girls were at just even playing 3-on-3 hockey. I mean, just the number of girls who are just really exceptional hockey players in Minnesota is amazing. Yeah. What role did the level of quality of play that you saw in Minnesota impact your development?
Oh, it was huge. I mean, I think Minnesota is just a hockey hotbed. We love hockey here. A lot of girls play. Obviously, a lot of boys play as well. And you kind of touched on it. The volume of players, I think, creates real competitiveness and just raises the level. It feels like every single year. But even back when I was playing, I mean, I graduated high school in 2009, so this was a while ago. But you played for your high school. We had enough numbers where, you go to your public high school, you go to your private high school, whatever it is, like they have a team and we play against each other. There's probably about 50 or 60 high school teams when I was playing, which is quite a few. So it was huge. And it obviously helped with exposure as well. I didn't really play hockey outside of my high school season. I didn't play on a club team or anything like that. I had some other sports that I played. So I really didn't play hockey much. I think I played 25 games a year, which was my high school season, but that season was very competitive, obviously a ton of fun. And I'm just really lucky that I grew up here.
Gotcha. And so you mentioned that you didn't play hockey year round. I understand that you played softball quite a bit, that you were the ace of the Hunter softball pitching staff. So here's my question. Usually goalies are catchers, not pitchers. How come you end up being a pitcher?
Yeah, so I did catch quite a bit, just kind of moved around different positions. I think I really liked the idea of being involved on every play and being a big part of it and kind of deciding, what pitches I was going to throw and things like that, trying to outsmart batters. Honestly, not sure how I really got into pitching. I feel like they kind of put us all through, the paces, I guess, to see who could do it and who liked it. And I really did. But yeah, I played a ton of I probably played more softball than I did hockey. I played all through the spring and summer, went all over the US, probably traveled more for softball than I ever did for hockey too. So that was definitely another passion of mine growing up.
Well, then the next obvious question is, how do you think softball helped you with your hockey career?
That's a good question. Honestly, the pressure side of it, being a pitcher, and I feel like I was in a lot of situations as a hitter too that were, runners on base, got to get them home kind of situation. I think I batted third on most of the teams I was on. So I think the pressure of the moment, like, you're not fighting against a clock in softball, but you still, every pitch matters. Every pitch is important. I still watch the College World Series every year. I think it's so fun. The there's such a small margin of error, especially on a small field. I mean, baseball is just somewhat similar, but it's such a bigger field. I feel like the reaction time isn't as quick as it is for softball. So those things I think played into it, but certainly just dealing with, being involved in big plays, the pressure side of it was probably the part I can apply to hockey the most.
Okay, and I'm just curious, did at some point did you have to make a choice between playing college softball versus playing college hockey?
Yeah, I think, at the time it was when I was a junior, and if you were getting recruited in grade 11 as a junior, that was early. And obviously now it's kind of back to that. And we've gone a lot of different ways in the recruiting cycles, but it was probably my junior year that I decided, I want to play hockey. That's what I'd like to do. And then kind of focused on where to go late in my junior year and into my senior year.
Okay, we're going to get into the recruiting process in just a moment. I have one last kind of youth hockey related question, which is, what's your favorite youth hockey memory as you look back on those early days of playing hockey in Minnesota?
Oh, that's a great question. It's really hard to pick one specifically, but I would say, so one of the players I grew up playing with had an outdoor rink at her house, and it was legit. I mean, it was the kind that you see on, the ESPN specials. I mean, it had boards, it had lights. We had a warming shack that we went and got ready in. And so it's not necessarily one specific moment, but we were there all the time and always scrimmaging. And the best part about it is we would be from age, you might have a 6-year-old out there all the way up to a 60-year-old who we threw in the net and we just threw the sticks in the middle and played. And I distinctly remember that rink and all the kids I grew up with playing there. And she lived just a short drive away. That rink is etched into my memory. It was a huge part of my hockey experience and just kind of the love of the game. I mean, it was so much fun. We had a blast.
That's awesome. Like it's basically hockey day in Minnesota every day for
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, well, so most girls in Minnesota tend to have a preference to stay in Minnesota or maybe just go, down the road to Madison. How did you end up at Harvard and why?
Yeah, so my recruiting process, for a goalie, it's a little bit different. There's obviously fewer spots for goalies. So you have to that comes into play what schools have spots available. My final 2 schools were actually UMD and Harvard. That's kind of been the story for me, I guess, in playing and in coaching. But both really good opportunities in terms of the programs that they had at the time and still do. But for me, I really, once I started taking a closer look at Harvard, it was an opportunity to get away from home, see a little bit of the world, so to speak, or a different part of the US, live in a city. Once I visited, I loved it there. And just, the opportunity to get a really good education. My parents were super supportive of moving away. They knew they weren't going to be able to come to as many games, but they thought it was a great opportunity. And actually a big part of my experience was my high school assistant coach when I was a sophomore, junior, Angie Francisco. She's from Duluth, a good close family friend. She had actually played at Harvard. She's married to Joachim Flieg, who actually recruited me at Harvard. So it's a crazy web, but she just gave me the vote of confidence that I think a lot of kids need when they're going to choose an Ivy school. She was like, you can do it. Don't question yourself. There's no doubt in my mind, if that's what you want to do, you should do it. So, and that was kind of before I even was really making a decision that came, later in my senior year. So that's kind of what took me away from Duluth. And I'm really glad I went to Harvard. I had an unbelievable experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
And what, what are your reflections on Katie Stone? We've had a couple other folks who went to Harvard talk about her. What role did she have on influencing you both on the ice and off the ice?
The word influence, I tell people all the time, she's influenced my life more than anyone else in my life, aside from my parents. I think the world of her. I think she has an unbelievable program. I have so much respect for what she's done to build it, what she continues to do. She's near and dear to me still. I often, will just pick up the phone, give her a call, see what she's doing. We have great conversations, and really, I mean, she's why I'm a coach. She was such an influence, such a positive influence on my life in really formative years. And when I graduated and was done playing, all I wanted to do was create that environment that she created for other college players. And yeah, I love her. I love her.
Okay, great. So let me ask you, like, about actually being a goalie for Harvard, or at least at the collegiate level. Harvard just happened to be where you play. What was the difference in the quality and the level of play at the college level, and especially at one of the highest levels? Because you guys had some great teams. I believe you lost in the finals of the NCAA championship. What was the difference between the level of play in that and just kind of like U19 or U16 girls hockey?
Yeah, it's honestly hard to explain until you're in it, but I the first couple of days of practice my freshman year I probably let in more pucks than I stopped. I really felt like I wasn't sure if I should be playing at this level. And then it's the type of thing, I mean, we see it with our players all the time too. Like, you just got to keep showing up and you start to be able to play at that level and you build your confidence and you get used to it. But I think it was even in practice, I mean, it was faster. It was things happened like it seemed like at a completely different speed. The players shot harder. They played with their head up more. They picked their spots more. I think as a goalie, it was just, everyone felt like they were a goal scorer. It just like that they were able to kind of pick you apart is how it felt early on. And like I said, it's really, until you're thrown into it, it's hard to know exactly what to expect. But especially because I didn't play club hockey in the summers, I was truly going from 25 games a year in Minnesota high school to a 40-game season at the college level. I think the biggest adjustment, aside from practice pace and just being prepared and making sure once you're out there, you know what's going on. I think when you add in like the nutrition side of it, the strength and conditioning, going into the weight room, I mean, our team was in phenomenal shape my freshman year. They were strong. Our upperclassmen were strong. They could run fast. They could run hard. They could run long. Like it was just a completely different level. But ultimately, you keep showing up and then all of a sudden that's you a couple of years later, which is I think is one of the best parts of college athletics. So it was a different level in basically every way.
And what do you attribute, like, what were the top one or two adjustments you made, or pieces of advice that you got, or things that you worked on that helped you get to that next level?
Number one was the weight room, like the strength and conditioning. I actually had Jessica Zumi had played at UMD and was training in Duluth when I was working to get to Harvard. I think this was before my senior year of high school and then my freshman year of college. And
she's the assistant coach she's an assistant now at Vermont with Jim Plumer, who was previous guest on the podcast. But keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's great. So she was a great college player. She had played here in Duluth. She had kind of been a mentor of mine my last couple of years of high school, and she was training here in Duluth. So she helped me a ton. And I don't know what I would have done without her before going into college. But even then, I got there and there was just so much to learn. And now I think there's a lot more opportunity for players to kind of bridge that gap when they're in high school and start to learn about off ice training. But you have to commit to that either going into your freshman year or if it's a rude awakening your freshman year to make the biggest jump you possibly can. Because if you're not in shape and you don't check that box, you don't feel comfortable, it's everything is harder. Like I said, the wear and tear of the season, being prepared for practice every day, all of it, being able to play back-to-back games on the weekend. That was a huge piece that I committed to really my freshman year, and the summer going into my sophomore year made a huge difference.
Gotcha. All right. So I really actually want to talk about, goaltenders. So I'm going to transition just a little bit with to kind of get more into the coaching side of things, but coaching from a goaltending perspective. So really basic question: what makes a great goaltender?
A lot of different, I mean, it's a good question. It starts with skating. I always feel that way. I think if you were to put 15 goalies out on the ice, 12, 15, 20 goalies, however many, and you watch them skate, go through just a set of skating drills, edge work, movement drills for 10 or 15 minutes, you can probably pick the top 3 to 5 in that group just based on watching them skate, because that's how important it is. Like, you have to be able to move in your crease. You know, you can see that at the Olympic level, at the national team level on the women's side, and the professional level. The NHL right now, we're watching the playoffs. It's the goalies have to be able to move well. And so to me, that's extremely important. One thing I've also tried to be really open-minded to in recruiting and in watching is like, no two goalies are the same, and that's not a bad thing. I think that's like really exciting. If I have examples from our team this year, you know, Emma Soderberg and JoJo Chobak were two of the best goalies in the country, I think, and they play completely different styles, which is really fun to coach. Their goalie sessions are completely different, and they also have elements that are similar, but they're very different, and I think that's great. So that's something I've tried to be open to in my coaching. And it's, everyone has their own style, and I think letting goalies play the way that comes natural to them while also like developing and building on that is really important. But truly, it all starts with skating and being able to move in your crease.
Okay, so you totally led me into kind of what my next question was, which is, okay, so let's say, you know, you're looking at 20 goalies, and now you narrowed it down to 5. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then you got like an Emma and a JoJo, and you got 3 others who all have different styles. Okay,
Yep.
well then, once you've narrowed down to those 5 who could skate really well, how do you then start evaluating them, since they have completely different styles? At the end of the day, it's about who keeps the puck out of the net, but
Yeah.
it's so hard to evaluate in a 2 or 3, you know, game, you know, evaluation. You know, they can be very, very different in terms of what you see over that period of time, and very different styles. How much does like personal preference impact that?
I'm sure it's a big piece of it. And at a certain point, if you feel really good about all of them, there's probably no bad choice, which is where luck probably comes into it a little bit for goalies. But I honestly think, I think the hardest place to recruit goalies is at a tournament or in games. I think it was a couple of years ago, I told Maura Kroll, our head coach, I said, I am going to see to it that I get to shoot on any goalie we ever bring in. So I'm going to go to a camp where I can shoot on them myself, or I can watch them, you know, really closely on the ice, working a drill. I can watch, shooters shoot on them in a on ice setting. And I have to be that close to it to see what I truly think, versus watching them in a game and maybe, you know, they're on a good team and they only get 5 shots, and that's not necessarily their fault, but we just don't have a great sense of how they are. Or, you know, maybe they have a ton of shots and I only get to see them in one half of one game on one Saturday afternoon, and they're not feeling too great, or, you know, whatever it might be. From my standpoint, I think it's really important to try to see them in a practice setting, in a drill setting, which doesn't tell you everything, but to be able to see it with my own eyes, to shoot on them myself, I think gives a much better assessment than just like in a tournament game. I think that's the hardest time for goalies to really show what they can do.
Got it. Okay, so and I'm sorry, I still want to do one last, like, drill down a little bit on that one, which is, okay, you have them on the ice, you're watching them take shots. What are the top 1 or 2 things you're looking for?
Yeah, so skating, movement, being able to move. And then I think after that is, how do they play within their own style? Meaning, like, can they anticipate? I think hockey IQ, like, rarely gets talked about for goalies as much as it does with players. And I think it's extremely important. So Emma, like, since we're on UMD, Emma Soderberg, super athletic, super flexible. But she also reads the game really well within what she's able to do. So she knows, like, she's really good at, like, what depth she needs to play at based on certain plays. She knows when a pass is coming across on a 2-on-1 and boom, she's got to explode and get there. She's great at reading those plays. I feel the same way about JoJo. I think she's a phenomenal goalie. She plays a little bit differently, where she doesn't have to rely on athleticism as much. She's positionally really sound. Her save selection is really good. So that's high hockey IQ as well. Like, I know what I bring to the table and I'm going to use it as well as I can. So, like I said, the practice element is huge for me. I like to see a goalie up close and personal. I also think in recruiting, it's really important to see them in a game setting, to see how they're able to read hockey plays, whether it's on the rush or in the offensive zone. That's really important. And then, so we got skating, we've got hockey IQ. I think like compete level and just a really deep competitiveness in terms of wanting to keep the puck out of the net is, and whatever that might look like. Some goalies scramble in tight a little more than others. Doesn't mean they're necessarily battling harder, but like if they really want to keep the puck out of the net, if it ticks them off to let a puck in, like that's typically a good sign.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay, one last technical question, and forgive me if I'm asking the wrong question, but how do you feel about VH versus reverse VH? And do you have a preference?
I don't have a preference. I mean, I think different the VH has gone away a little bit more in recent years to the RVH, but I honestly think there's situations where you can use them both. And I know that's kind of a gray answer, but a good example is Maddie Rooney, who just won a gold medal in 2018. She's on the silver medal winning team in 2022. And she's
a
still
volunteer
playing
coach
now.
with volunteer goalie coach with UMD.
Yep,
So let's
she
make it
helped
clear, full
consult with
disclosure. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, no, she's been awesome. It's been great to have her back involved with our program, and she has a great eye for goaltending. Not all goalies are really good at like breaking down the game. I think Maddie does a great job of it. She's been a huge help for us. But she's a new age goalie, and she uses the VH probably as well as anybody I've seen in the women's game. So when she uses it, like low goal line attacks, like from dots down, like she knows when to use it to make sure she's on her edge. She can push across. It's honestly less important which it is and more important where you're using it. I think I see girls, especially young girls, who don't have the height in their shoulders. I see them sitting down in an RVH like a lot for long periods of time when the puck's in the corner. That always makes me a little nervous. And you see it with NHL goalies too, but they're really big. Like if I'm 6'6" and I can be in the RVH and now the crossbar, my shoulder's above the crossbar, that's a little bit different. So it really depends on size, situation, making sure you're not overusing those two moves. But I think there's a place for both of them in hockey still today.
Wow. Okay. Well, now that we know that you're a really good goaltender coach, because you know quite a bit about all this stuff, let's talk about your coaching career. So before we get to your actual coaching career, who is your favorite coach throughout your entire hockey playing career, all the way from Mites all the way up to playing at Harvard?
Yeah, well, Katie Stone is the best. I love her. I'll sing her praises all day long. I think she pushed me in ways that no one else ever did, and showed that she cared about me while she did it too. And that's kind of a style that I try to emulate now. But before that, in youth hockey, I talked about Jamie Stauber. Like I said, he's Rob Stauber's brother. Unbelievable coach. I think I was so lucky to have him as a youth coach because he made the game so fun. He taught us a ton, constantly teaching us about the game. And we had forechecks that we were running as Mite team, but they were very simple. He was really trying to teach us just simple tactics and how to kind of see the game but it wasn't overkill on the tactical side. Everything was always so fun. Everything was a game. It was competitive. He brought the best out in me, and I'm so glad he was my first coach because he was definitely my favorite youth hockey coach. He made it so much fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So now let's get to the most obvious question. Why did you decide to become a coach? And specifically, why basically immediately after graduation did you choose to become a coach at Harvard as opposed to pursuing other potential opportunities, either playing pro or just, maybe using your history and science degree?
Yeah, so it's the timing was really interesting. So like I said, kind of touched on this before, I just had such a good college hockey experience, and that didn't mean everything was perfect. Not everything was super positive or always went my way, like nothing like that. It was just, I felt like I was pushed. I was in an arena that was making me better on the ice, off the ice. I was surrounded by people who were in really good shape, were really good friends. We had a great community. We did things outside of the rink. All that we try to provide now at UMD. And so I was just really inspired by my 4 years being able, I can't imagine college without playing Harvard hockey. And Coach Stone had such an impact on me. And I wanted to go create that now on the other side of it as a coach myself. So the timing of it is what worked out in my favor. So I graduated in 2013. Coach Stone was going to the Olympics, so she was going to be away for the entire 13-14 season. Maura Kroll, who was our assistant coach, was going to be the head coach, and Haley Moore was one of the assistants, and they needed another assistant. And I had been a captain my junior and senior years, so I had done that for 2 years. I had kind of built throughout my career, and I felt like, hey, maybe I can just coach this team. It was a 10-month position. I had applied for a ton of other coaching jobs at prep schools out east, mostly at the prep level. But I thought, hey, maybe I'll see if they'll have me back. Maybe that'll work. And they had a ton of people applying for that. But my main sticking point was, I know this is temporary because then Coach Stone is back. And why not have, who better than someone who's been in the program, led in the program. And they were not overly open to it at first, but ultimately convinced Coach to interview me. And after that interview, she started to warm up to it a little bit. I think I had a few more interviews and ultimately got that spot, and then was able to stay on another year once Haley Moore left for the East Coast Wizards program. So just timing wise really worked out for me well.
That's awesome. Awesome. Okay. So we're going to talk about kind of your transition to Minnesota Duluth. Before we talk about how you actually ended up there, let's actually just talk about the school. So the school, I didn't realize how far north it was from Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's about 150 miles north of it, right on Lake Superior. And it's about 10,000 students. So it's a pretty big school.
Yeah.
So why don't you just talk about the school, the academics, the facilities, AMS Oil Arena, which is you guys are traditionally ranked third in attendance for the women's game. So just talk about the school and what it's like to go to school there, both as a student and an athlete.
Yeah, I have interesting perspective just growing up in Duluth. So we're right on the tip of Lake Superior. Duluth is, when you count kind of the suburbs around it, it's a city of about 90 to 100,000 people. So like you said, it's pretty good size. We're about 2.5 hours north of Minneapolis, St. Paul, depending on how fast you drive. And so yeah, we're right up I-35, tip of Lake Superior. Kind of an interesting, as a town, like I said, 90 to 100,000 are a pretty good sized city. We have a downtown, but we're also a college town with UMD. And then you have the lake and a ton of trails, like, that you can hike, run, bike, all that stuff right in Duluth. So we're an interesting combination of a city, but we also have, like, if you like nature, if you like to be outdoors, it's a great spot for that, kind of a vacation destination for a lot of people in Minnesota and the Midwest. UMD, like you said, 10,000 undergrads. We have another 1,000 graduate students, but yeah, it's our university here in Duluth. It's probably what employs like the most people aside from our healthcare system here, which is pretty big as well. And the two biggest areas that our student athletes take advantage of academically are science and engineering school, really well renowned, unbelievable buildings on campus. Like there's so much opportunity there. So if we have pre-med students, they're typically in science and engineering. In the science part, biochem. And then we have some engineers on our team too. And then business. The business school is also well renowned, part of the University of Minnesota system, really good business school, places into really good jobs really across the US. And we've had some of our European players go back and work for Johnson & Johnson and different companies throughout Sweden and Switzerland for the most part in business. So those two schools are probably our most popular, and fittingly, when we talk to players, those are probably the two most common answers we get when we talk about what do you want to do. They're usually within those realms. So really exciting for us that we have such great opportunities in those two schools.
Gotcha. So for folks who don't know, UMD on the women's hockey side has won 5 national championships. In fact, they won the first 3 national championships. And this year, at least the last couple of years, pretty darn good seasons as well. This year, losing to Ohio State in the finals. I know you don't want me reminding you about that. So let's just talk about the actual program. I got a couple of questions. So my first question is about on the coaching side of things. Does your name need to rhyme with Dora in order to coach at Minnesota Duluth?
I know, it's crazy, right? Maura, Laura, and Laura. The funny thing is we all kind of have, Coach is Coach. Everyone calls her Coach. Everyone calls me Lou. That's my nickname. And then we call Shu because her last name is Schuler. So we don't actually go by those names, but we do have Lou and Shu, so that rhymes as well. we deal with it. We deal with it.
All right. And so related to that is there seems to be a Harvard connection with Minnesota Duluth. So Julie Chu, I believe, came from Harvard and was an assistant. And then obviously Maura came over as the head coach. And I'm assuming she kind of brought you with you. Maybe just talk about how you ended up at UMD with Maura and talk about how the coaching staff works these days.
Yeah, so my 2 years coaching at Harvard were awesome. We went to the NCAA tournament in 13-14 when Maura was interim head coach for Coach Stone, who was at the Olympics. And then in 14-15 went all the way to the final, lost to Minnesota that year. And so 2 really good years. UMD was hiring in 2015, and Maura took the job here at Duluth and had a great resume leading up to that, especially having that year to take over at Harvard. So I had the opportunity, decided to move here. And then, yeah, it was kind of a tough decision whether to decide to stay at Harvard or to come here. I mean, I'm fortunate that I've been involved with my alma mater in my hometown. So 2 places that really mean a lot to me and still do to this day. But yeah, she asked me to come with, and it was a great opportunity to go to a school that had scholarships, kind of see what that was like. I knew there was a lot in place for UMD to be able to have success. It still had a lot of really good players there at the time. In 2015, we inherited Sid Morin, who went to the Olympics, Ashley Bricklick, Laura Stalder, Maddie Rooney was going to be a freshman, and there was a lot to be excited about. So came here in 2015 and have been here ever since.
Gotcha. So a couple of things that I was surprised about is, Minnesota teams tend to have a huge number of Minnesota players, which you guys do, but it's only 64% of your roster, roughly speaking. So, and you have you have international folks, you even let some Canadians play on your team. Like, how do you think about roster construction and where folks come from? Because I'm assuming you basically have, you're definitely a prime destination for Minnesota players, which probably you could fill your entire roster with.
Yeah, our motto, I guess, when it comes to recruiting is just go find the best players we possibly can. And we're willing to go wherever that is. I mean, this program has a strong tradition in Europe. Coach Schuler, when she was here before, this is kind of her second stint at UMD. She did a great job recruiting throughout Europe. And so for us, it's, wherever we can find the best players, we'll go get them. And, for us, that's meant drawing out of Minnesota quite a bit and just the volume of players here, that there's just so much talent. Our Minnesota players, we have a lot of good ones. And, but yeah, we think it's important too, to go to Canada, have especially been drawing out of Western Canada in recent years. And then, we'll go to Europe too. We have Emma Soderberg from Sweden. We've been over to Sweden a couple times. And so for us, it's just, wherever the best players are, we're going to go get them. And for us, if we can create a diverse locker room that way too, that's just an extra benefit that we really like about, recruiting from different areas.
Gotcha. And playing in the WCHA, I mean, the level of competition is just insane between Wisconsin, Minnesota, now Ohio State, and you guys. What do you think, how has the Bulldogs program done such a great job of remaining so competitive and being right there almost every year with the program? What's the key to the success? What's the secret sauce, other than you just have a tremendous amount of support from obviously the school?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge piece of it because, obviously those other 3 schools are all Big Ten schools. We're not in a Power 5 conference, but what we are is a school that cares a ton about hockey. I mean, when you look at the community, even the community support that we get it's strong, and it's like over and over every year, the community is so interested in how men's and women's hockey at UMD are doing. And I think a big part of that is, like, we love hockey in northern Minnesota, but if we're going to go consistently watch a game, like, we can't go down I-35 and watch the Wild every home game because that's a 2.5-hour, 5-hour round trip. So people in Duluth, like, they love hockey, but their team is UMD. Like, this is basically their professional, the college hockey scene is what people are so interested around here. And so as a result of that, we get, really good fan base. I think we're just like a college hockey town. I think perhaps like the best one in the country, just because that's what everyone's focused on. There's so many good women's hockey programs. Like, it's so great to see, but I think it's pretty unique where the town, like, that's it. There's not a lot of other distractions or things to do. Like, Duluth has offers a lot, but hockey's number one. Like that's in the winter, that's where everyone wants to be. And so I think the support we get from the school, and you've seen it on the men's side as well. Like our men's team has had such great success with their championships in 18 and 19, and then also going to the tournament in 21 and 22. So we clearly have the support we need from our school and our athletic director, Josh Burlow. He's here at almost every home game. So we have support, resources, and we have the history too. You know, when you're one of 5 schools that's won a national championship, that puts you in a unique category, and we're really proud of that history.
Gotcha. And kind of last question is related to, the getting actual players to play for you. When you think about your most recent recruits who accepted, the offer to come to UMD, who obviously had, other really great options, what's the feedback that they tell you as to here's why I picked UMD over these other great schools?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a combination of things, and like I said, I think there's a lot of good women's hockey programs that, everybody offers like a lot of different things. For us, it's a combination. So one is playing in a really strong league. As you've mentioned, I think it's extremely competitive. Every weekend it's a battle. You feel like you're going through a gauntlet every series. And so that's exciting to players. I think with that, just a development piece. And our development model is let's bring in the best players we possibly can, because putting them in practice against each other is what's going to develop them the most. But I also think we have a staff that's committed to development. I mean, Coach Kroll has won medals at the U18 level as an assistant coach and a head coach. Coach Schuler was the head coach of Team Canada at the 18 Olympics. So we have like that coaching pedigree that I think draws players, and they know like we're going to make sure we get the absolute most out of them, develop them as much as we can. And then the other piece, I mean, our facility, you can see it a little bit behind you in your background for those seeing the video portion, but it's an unbelievable facility. It helps us with our development. And I think the city of Duluth, a lot of the kids, I think we have 4 in our incoming class, like they're really excited to not only come and practice every day at UMD and play in this league, but what Duluth offers outside of the rink, I think is really exciting. Obviously, mental health is a huge topic right now, and we have not only really good resources at UMD, but just the ability to walk, you walk outside the rink, you're right on the lake. You can go for a walk on the lake, you can bike on the lake. Our players take advantage of that. They sail, they go up the shore and go camping. Like, you can get away from the city if you want to. You can be a big part of it here downtown, and there's things to do there too. So I think just what Duluth offers in terms of a lot of different things outside of the rink, that's where I think we tend to find that players are really interested. Like, oh, I feel like that could be home for me. I know I can find things outside of the rink that really interest me and where I'm comfortable. So that's what we hear in recent years.
And one thing you didn't mention is that one of the reasons why they come is for you, because one of the things that Coach Kroll actually said about you is that you care just as much about the players as their parents do, which is a pretty nice compliment in terms of the parents and the players coming to the school just because they know that they're going to be well taken care of. All right, let's move into the recruiting side of things, which obviously you're playing a big role of it. As I kind of mentioned to you right before we started to hit record, you and I have been in the same place. You're deeply involved in USA Hockey and have been to St. Cloud. You mentioned you're going back to St. Cloud this summer with the recruiting piece of it. Just talk about, generally speaking, where you are today in the recruiting process for 2024s and 2025s. Where are you at, in terms of planning for what's going to happen in June, and just the overall process these days?
Yeah, it's exciting. I think the rule change a couple of years ago has been really good for both young people, but also for us. And just really excited. June 15th is around the corner, so obviously that's when we can first talk to 2024. So just kind of getting things settled. I mean, we've a lot of the work has been done to this point because we've watched those players, in most cases for years, but especially this past year. Fortunately, we were able to travel again, so got out to see them. Still watching a lot of video. We use Instac quite a bit, but you can get video in a lot of different ways. So still kind of working through that and coming up with our plan for when June 15th hits. And I know our men's staff is just as excited about kind of the recruiting for the summer. We're all kind of gearing up for visits and all that sort of stuff. So, it's just an exciting time around the rink, and we're, June 15th is definitely circled on the calendar.
Gotcha. All right. So a couple of specific questions. Do you have like a specific target list that on June 15th you're going to call and say, hey, we wanted to understand what your plans were and how what what role UMD might play in your recruiting strategy?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, there's always a list, and we're just still kind of finalizing it, but we will be prepared for that day.
Okay. And I don't need to know specifics for this year, but generally speaking, in your career of recruiting, as the recruiting day, begins, roughly how many people are on that list? Is it like 3 to 5? Is it like 15 to 20? Is it just so folks understand, like, is it a big list? Is it a small list?
Good question. I would say depending on how many kids you need to bring in, it's probably 4 or 5 times that, just
Okay.
because, you got to cast a wide enough net where, players are going to choose other schools, or you're going to work through it. But yeah, I mean, if you're recruiting, if you're trying to get 5 kids, you're not calling 5 kids. You're calling at least, probably 15 to 20 for those 5, or maybe more. And I think it probably depends on the school too. But that would be, you multiply it by a handful.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. And then I do have a question from a goalie parent, and this doesn't need to be goalie specific, but the question is, do players, need to get an official invitation from you to do an on-campus visit, or like how do unofficial visits work? How does that work between the two, official versus unofficial visits?
Yeah, so unofficial visits are paid for by recruits themselves and parents, so they can do those like on their own, and don't necessarily, they also might be set up with our help too, but that's going to be paid for on their own, and that's within the time constraints, obviously, once those dates hit. But the difference between an unofficial and an official is, on an unofficial, like, they're going to pay their own way. On an official, we would pay their way. So in order to do that, you do sort of need we would extend that invite to them. We're going to pay for this. You're on campus for 48 hours. We bring you here, provide lodging, all that sort of stuff. So that is a little bit more, we would extend that invitation for an official visit.
Gotcha. And once they get on campus, how much time do they have to make a decision? Is it dependent on the kid? Does it depend on how many openings you have left? Like, in the business world, there's something called an exploding offer. Like, do you give an offer and then say, like, hey, we need to know by this date, otherwise we're moving down the list?
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of different tactics, for a lot of different coaches and schools, but it might be, there is no timeline. There might be a 2-week timeline. There might be a 2-day timeline. There might be there's offers out and we'll first come, first serve kind of situation. So there's a lot of different tactics. And I think recruiting has become more and more kind of like that, like the business world versus, we're going to bring you in and kind of let you think about it as long as you want. But there is still some of that. So I think it just depends on the school, the situation, the spots available. It's a little bit different for every situation.
Okay, cool. All right. So now I'm going to move on specifically to goalie recruiting questions. Very specifically, what should goalies be doing in the summer as it relates to development versus attending showcases or tournaments, which give them exposure?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's probably not a one size fits all answer, but I certainly lean more the way of training, and whoever that might be for a given goalie, whether you have a goalie coach or you're able to go to goalie camps, but whatever it is that you feel is going to help you most in your development, to me, that should be the bulk of your plan for the summer, because that's the most important part. Like, make sure you're getting better in the off season for the next season. I think showcases and tournaments and those kind of things, kind of hit on it earlier, like, certainly important. It's a way for coaches to see goalies, but it's for one, I think it's a little tricky, because you can go to a tournament, you might play 4 halves and you might get 16 shots, you might get 4 shots each half, and that's your whole weekend, is that you faced 16 shots, and maybe 12 of them were, dump-ins. I don't know. Like, it's the kind of thing where you leave a lot to chance, because how much are you truly going to be tested and able to show your skills? So they're great opportunities, but I would say the mixing them in, and not going to too many of those is the key. If your whole summer is showcases, you're probably not getting as much out of your training and developing as much as you can. And so I think that's the key to me. Train more and mix in showcases where you can. Obviously, this is all, if there's a financial piece to all of this, I think hockey is just extremely expensive. It's a tough thing to balance. And so, my other piece of advice, like, it's okay not to be on the ice 24/7. Between my freshman and sophomore year of college is probably when I trained on the ice the most. And my sophomore year was tough. Like, I just had burned out. I skated probably too much. And I learned that, and then you figure things out as you go. But I think that's a huge piece. Like, if you're starting to dread going to the rink or having to stop the puck, like, it's okay to take a break. Maybe it's playing another sport. Maybe it's doing something completely different. But I think mixing in rest and just not always, having to spend money on a lot of these things is probably a piece of it for some people as well.
Got it. Great. Okay. So last recruiting related question. So given the current recruiting environment for goalies, so at least from the 2023 perspective, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but the actual number of commits that have been publicly announced is a number much smaller than historical years. And I expect it to probably stay the same for 2024s. And I hate to say this, but probably also the same for 2025s because of COVID, because of the transfer portal, et cetera, et cetera. So how should a goalie figure out what their recruiting strategy should be, who's a 2024 or 2025? Should they, does it depend on how good they are? Should they focus on, top 10 schools, top 40 schools, also consider D3? I mean, I know a parent who's also looking at Canada, playing, U Sport. So
Yeah.
what advice would you give on just putting together a recruiting strategy for a goalie at this point?
Yeah, I would say two things. One is most of what I just hit on, like, focus on training, on getting better, on developing. Like, I see this with players we've recruited over several years and just players you watch, like, the ones who maintain their focus, even after they're committed, the ones who maintain their focus on, like, I just want to come every day, have fun and get better. Like, they're the ones who continue to do that. They continue to get better. They continue to enjoy it. And that's such a big piece of continuing to have success and creating opportunity for yourself. So I think that's a big piece of it. And if you develop and get better and you become basically as good as you possibly can, that's going to facilitate opportunity, and we will find you, and by we, I mean, like, college coaches or whatever level it is, like, we're everywhere, it feels like. So I think that's putting the emphasis on training over anything else, especially because you can send video now. So, like, and coaches, I think, in the last 2 years have become a little more open to that. Obviously, you could use video for the last however many years, but I don't know that we were always using it as much as we are willing to now. So focus on getting better, train, and then good things will happen. So that's always going to be my advice. The second part of that, I think you kind of already touched on it, as just being open-minded. Like, Division I women's college hockey is awesome. I'm a huge proponent of it. I think it's a great level. It's really fun to play at. It's very competitive. The resources are fantastic at most places. But I also think, like, Division III, there's so many schools who sponsor Division III women's hockey. Their championship this year with Middlebury and Gustavus was unbelievable. The crowd was awesome. Obviously, it was at Middlebury, undefeated season, but, like, it's such a great level of hockey as well. And then you have club, and then you have CIS. And I mean, there's just so many opportunities to play, which I think is which is so great. Like, that wasn't the case in women's hockey 10, 20, 30 years ago. But keeping an open mind to playing at different levels, at different schools, with different opportunities, that's really important. And what comes with that is also being honest with yourself or your family, or whatever that recruiting process involves. Like, there's a difference sometimes between where you want to be and where you actually, like, might go and be really happy and enjoy your experience. So I think it's important for people to determine what's important. Is it playing time? Is it being in a winning environment? Sometimes it's both of those. Sometimes it's neither of those. Whatever it is, like, come up with what's important to you and be really honest about what might fit. And then, we'll see. And like I said before, I mean, luck comes into it too. What opportunities are available? What coach likes you? Maybe this coach is watching, they have 3 goalies that they really like, and you could essentially pick out of a hat, which one they're going to take on. And then that's where, last point, I think it's really important to do well in school, treat officials well, treat parents well. I mean, when we're at rinks, like, it's not just hockey that we're watching. We're watching players skate to the penalty box, which most often doesn't happen with a goalie, but you know, how they're talking to officials when they come out of the locker room and they're carrying their bag, like what they say to their parents or their teammates. Those things could end up, if you've got 3 to 5 goalies that are all in the same category, you might start to look, okay, now we've got to go to the next tier of what's going to play into them being part of our program. You know, their academics, how they are as a kid. Could they be a leader in our program someday? All those things that could be the difference. They become really important.
Wow. Oh, Laura, I just want to say this has become the must listen episode for goalies to listen to. So this has been outstanding. My last question is related to if folks want to learn more about the program, if they want to get to know, you guys a little bit better, what's the best way? Or do you have any camps coming up, any events you're going to be going to? Obviously, I know you're going to be at the USA Hockey national camps. What's the best way to kind of raise their hand and say, hey, I'm interested in getting to know you guys a little bit more?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we'll be a lot of different places this summer across the U.S., across Canada, all the national camps for both countries, the provincial camps too. Still seeing about getting to Europe as well. Our umdbulldogs.com is our website, and then maroonandgoldhockey.com is where our camp site is. That's going to be the last weekend in July 28th to 31st. I think the best way to follow us is on social media. So at UMDW Hockey on Twitter and Instagram are probably the most used for our team. I think Instagram does a really good job of showing a look into our program. So that would be the place to go. And there's recruiting questionnaires on our website, umdbulldogs.com, but social media has that opportunity as well to reach out and express interest.
Awesome. Laura, I really want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast and putting up with all my goalie questions and telling me about your hockey history and then obviously about Minnesota Duluth. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
I really want to thank Laura for coming on the podcast. She shared some awesome insights on goalies and, of course, playing hockey at Minnesota Duluth. If you want to connect with Laura, you can find links to the UMD website and Laura's Champs app profile in the show notes. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Before you go, I wanted to share more about the app in Champs app. If you've listened to this podcast before, you know I spend a lot of time talking with coaches, parents, and players about the hockey recruiting process. One of the key questions that people want to know is, how does a player get noticed by college coaches? While there are many ways to be discovered, the easiest way to get on a college's radar is to send a coach an email and provide them all the information they need to assess if you are a player worth keeping their eyes on. That's where the app part of Champs app comes in. Champs app was designed based on all the conversations and feedback we received about the recruiting process, and we've built a tool to help players and coaches connect with a ton of the information they want to know. It all starts with creating a free, beautiful Champs app profile. After that, there's some pretty magical things that can happen to help make the recruiting process a little less overwhelming. Your Champs app profile includes all the basic academic, personal, and athletic information coaches want to know. Then, by including video, schedule information, and your coach's contact details, colleges can easily start their evaluation process. You just copy and paste your personalized link and send it to coaches so they can see your public player profile without even having to log in or create a Champs app account. Or you can connect directly with coaches on Champs app. More and more coaches are creating their own Champs app profiles and connecting with players themselves every day. Now coaches can have all the information they need to assess where you might fit in their recruiting plans. Even better, college coaches can track your progress throughout the winter and showcase seasons, because as you make changes to your profile, coaches will get notified to your updates. And in the future, we will be adding even more amazing features to improve your visibility to the recruiting process and hopefully increase your odds of success. If you want to see what a player or coach profile looks like before you start your own, look in the show notes to see some examples. My kids and I have used Champs app for their recruiting process. In fact, my son was invited to a AAA tryout thanks to his Champs app profile. So go to www.champs.app and start your player or coach profile. It only takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete most of your key information. Good luck, and please let us know how it helped with your recruiting journey.